Well.
Yeah, well, I came in and like this was unplugged, and I was like, well, but I tested it. It works.
Oh, Joey's starting off the podcast with a bang.
We keeping you up over here, Joey?
Yawning. However, it might explain we are all pretty tired.
Yes, that is true. That is true.
Fine.
Nah.
Fine.
Welcome back to the Ridge Roundtable podcast.
Is that what it is now?
That's probably the slowest I've ever
It is.
uttered any words.
It is. So when I listen back to this at 2x, it'll sound perfectly normal.
Yeah. This is the Ridge Roundtable podcast. That is what it's called now. Over the summer, there was an episode. See, I can go fast too. That feels
Was
so
that on
right.
purpose?
Nope. Oh, that was just.
That was just
felt
Joey
right.
speed.
Oh my gosh, that was so good.
So, some people listen to this. A lot of people that listen to this don't go to the Ridge, but those that do go to the Ridge, the changes that have happened is I think since the last time we were on mic, every single person at this table has a new role.
True.
That is
So that's
true.
fun.
Which wasn't
Actually,
that long
my
ago.
new role started right as we were wrapping up the last season.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Like it was kind of the...
That's crazy.
I was
Yeah.
in onboarding mode,
Okay.
I think. Yeah.
So, what's your title now?
Groups and next steps.
Groups and
so
next
still
steps.
doing life groups and D groups,
Okay.
but have a new team where next steps with connections and serving and first impressions
Yeah.
and safety, kind of partnership from the parking lot to partnership.
Yeah.
All points in between a little bit.
That's cool.
People. Yeah, it's fun.
And I am the new men's pastor at the Bee Cave campus. People are listening to this in 2027, and everything's changed again.
We
Or
won't
2025,
have the same
actually.
roles in 2025.
I was going to say 2025. I mean, who knows?
Who knows?
And then, Lori, what's your new role?
So I am the new Equip Director.
Yay.
So I'm excited about that.
I threatened to have her also be the host of the podcast. And
I just couldn't do it. I mean, we give Joey a hard time, but in my heart of hearts, I know there's no way I could facilitate this.
Yeah.
You're good at it.
You can
pains
learn
me
it.
to say it, but you're really good at it.
And you like your chair, and you'd have to sit in that chair.
That would be weird.
There's now that would be the game changer. I couldn't
you
do
got to
it.
be in the middle if you're going to.
You can't host from the flank.
No flank
Wow.
hosting around here.
Wow, talk about on a T-shirt. You can't host from the flank.
I like it. One of the things we have talked about around the round table before is how we are processing our own lives, but then world events and things that are happening in the world. And
and P.S. We're in an election season.
yeah, and also we're in election season. And it's funny because I did not watch the debate the other night. And I heard enough about it from other people that I realized I just didn't need to. And so my answer was largely oblivious. And I know that could probably trigger some people. But for me, I just feel like there is so much going on around the world. And I really learned this from Stephanie, my wife. She, a couple years ago, she's been going to grad school and she wants to be a counselor. And I just, big idea guy, right? And I was like, you're going to start speaking at conferences and you're going to start writing books. And she looks at me, and if you know her, you know that that is the opposite of her personality. And she just, over time, she always was really, receiving of encouragement in that way. But she was like, babe, I just want to change the world for one. So like, in that, it's so genuine because over the last 5 or 6 years, she's gotten off of social media. She's kind of gotten rid of like any platform type thing. And she literally is just so present. And I've really gleaned that from her. And so when it comes to like what's going on in the world and all the things that are happening, it's like, I want to just be fully present where I am and impact people where I am. And that's not some holier than thou thing. It's like a discipline thing for me. So anyway, I'm largely oblivious to world events. How are you guys processing world events?
I see them.
Okay.
We got as of today, what's today? September the
12th,
2024. Let the listener understand. So we got Israel and Hamas still going at each other. We got Russia and Ukraine going at each other. You got Trump and Kamala going at each other. Right and left going at each other. Everybody's just going at each other, right? Thank God in January I decided to get off of Twitter, X, or X, the thing that's formerly known as Twitter. Like we guys call it X. But man, I truly can't imagine Jeff in January being Jeff in September and still looking at all that stuff on my feed every day. Like it has been such a, I think, I don't know,
rejuvenating?
It hadn't hurt anything. Let's just put it that way. I don't know if I don't know what it's helped, but it certainly hadn't hurt anything.
Yeah.
Because I kind of just look at some headline, like news headlines,
right?
Just on a news feed, but not on like a social media, everybody commenting feed.
Like
and that
all
really,
the opinions, just like the facts versus opinion.
The presentation of a way of interpreting these facts, kind of thing. Yeah. So you have to be aware of that. But just getting all the multitude of voices out of my feed has been extremely helpful, I think.
Yeah.
It's good.
So there's some wisdom to that, probably.
Yep.
Yeah. How about you?
I think I've always loved politics. When I was a little girl, I used to tell people I wanted to be a speechwriter for the president. I don't know why, but that seemed like a cool job to me. And so I followed politics and all that kind of stuff. And I think I just really, about maybe 8 years ago or so, it just got all so messy. Like what Jeff is talking about, that it broke my heart so much that I had to turn it off. So I think I mourned it and grieved it back then. And so now I'm kind of like, Jeff, I want to know what's going on. I don't want to be head buried in the sand, but I don't feel it and process it at a level that gives me anxiety anymore.
Yeah.
Like I might have a moment where I'm like, oh my gosh. But then I'm like, well, all right.
Yeah.
It is what it is. And I'll do my part.
Right.
I'm not going to not be involved, but I'm going to be involved to the extent that I'm responsible for. And after that, I can't get worked up.
Yeah.
One thing that's been interesting to me, and this could just be the circles that I run in are a little apolitical or a issue-ish, whatever. That's not a word. But like these aren't big topics of conversation either. Is that because I'm not immersed in all the chatter? So therefore, I'm not looking for the conversations, or I'm not instigating conversations, or did I just run around with the right people that don't talk about it either? I don't know, but it's like my life is somewhat devoid of that drama, which is kind of nice.
Yeah, that's interesting. So, and there may be some people that listen to this where they're like, are you saying that we shouldn't, or are you saying that we, and I wouldn't say that. We're just saying this is how we're dealing with it.
I think you don't have to.
Yeah, that's a good way to say it.
It isn't should or shouldn't, but you don't have to. Like you have agency in this. You don't have to get in the ruckus.
Yeah.
Well,
that's
and
a
I
good
say
pop word, ruckus.
That's good.
Yeah.
I say this all the time. If you're not spending equal amounts of time praying for your leaders, then your soul's never going to be at rest in the decision of should you be engaged or should you not be engaged. Because I just find that when I pray about it, I know that I've left it in God's hands. And so if I'm going to be involved, I'm going to do that in a place of peace. And if I'm going to be a little more disengaged, I'm going to do that in a place of peace. And I mean that with national leaders. I mean that with the leaders of this church. I mean that. So, which would be my bosses. So if you don't work in a church, you still should pray for the leaders of your church, but even your bosses, there's some settledness that happens. Yeah. So that keeps me from getting worked up.
That's good. And it kind of gives you some clarity on what you should steward, we all have been given a purpose and by God's sovereignty, gifts and experiences, and we're living our lives, and the time that we're given, the resources that we're given, and how we spend that. And for me in this season, I may be not as engaged, but for someone else who maybe has a different calling or a different background and experience, and the way in which they spend their time, and they have more time to spend, like they could be more involved, and they can be more not as oblivious as me. Anyway, just. I think freedom. I think that's the thing too, is if you've listened to us any amount of time, and I was literally just having a phone conversation yesterday with somebody who had some, some questions about what we believe and why. And we just did the triage. We did that tier 1, tier 2, tier 3. And there's this temptation that he wants to relieve tension. And I said, sorry, man. And he's like, man, I'm analytical, I'm linear, I'm whatever. I'm like, ooh, sorry. Like so much of what we believe is held in tension.
Yeah, you have to reframe that, or help them learn to reframe that instinct. It's funny, I was listening to another podcast yesterday, and it hitting on the ex-evangelical culture thing. They're actually interviewing the guy. I wish I could remember his name, but I didn't realize the ex-evangelical thing became, y'all figure that term?
Can you say?
So ex-evangelical is kind of the deconstructionist lane, but like they still claim the faith, but not the particular version they were raised with, kind of thing. So they're ex-evangelical, not evangelical. But the guy that coined that term on Twitter, 2016, put the first hashtag out, they were interviewing him. But so much of what he was talking about, like the thing they I use that very broadly, but the evangelical deconstruction crowd, a lot of what they have pushed away from is that rigid, it's got to be black or white, you have to make a statement, you have to take a stance, and things being so issue-oriented not in lieu of, but at least of equal importance or even more important than the faith that should drive those things.
Yeah.
The lack of wisdom that showed to them, I think. I don't know if they'd say it that way, but that's kind of what it is. It's like there's a lack of wisdom when we put issues or politics or our place in the world above the gospel, right? And so that's what they pushed against. The problem is a lot of them haven't found something to replace that with that's more, that's better.
Yeah.
So they're still kind of searching, but that's kind of where we find ourselves culturally in the church.
Yeah.
A lot of people that have left or pushing against it are the ones crying foul all the time. That's what they're crying foul about.
Well, and that makes me so mad because to get Bible nerdy, I mean, the word evangelical comes from the Greek word evangelion, which literally means good news. And the way that word was most often used is when there was a new king that was going to bring freedom and all these change. Like, so when the people heard the word evangelion, it was good news because there was a new ruler. And when it's used for Jesus at the time, that's the good news of the freedom that we have in Christ, that the long-awaited Messiah is now here, and that eternity is starting now. And there's a part of the night, like, it just makes me mad because I'm like, the word evangelical's amazing and wonderful.
It's been co-opted.
It's been co-opted, and then I get mad, and them are fighting words for me. So you want to get me...
Them are fighting words, y'all.
You want to get me worked up, evidently. That's what I get worked up
There you
about.
go.
Yeah, I like it. I like it. And that honestly is the segue into, doing a series in the book of Daniel. Want to kind of tell the Genesis story of that? I guess it was back in the spring. Like, it was a while ago.
It was a while ago.
Yeah. And
Late spring.
you were reading Daniel, and you just sent a text and said, "This is it."
I did.
You were like leading a quip before you even knew.
I was bossing Joey around. I was reading. I love Daniel, and I hadn't read it straight through in a long time, and I just sat down to read it, and I think I got maybe 5 minutes in, and I was like, I always try to read my Bible without my phone, but I got up to get it, and I was like, guys, Daniel is amazing.
Yeah.
Like, it's so good.
Yeah.
And then I think, did you jump on next?
I think it was Jeff, because I'm always the slowest adopter.
Yeah, Jeff jumped on, and he was like, oh my gosh, it is so good.
Yeah.
And we were all actually kind of going through some like leadership stuff and how to handle difficult situations. And it kind of spoke to all of us.
It ministered. So,
it did.
So from like a external, like good for others thing, like we often think that.
Right. That's how we decide what to do.
And then this one was like, this like was like penetrating our own hearts and like humbling us. And it was like, okay, yeah. So I actually remember because I caught up like a day or two later, and I remember sitting on my back porch, and you all already had the conversation.
Jeff and I had already done it.
But there's this and I was like, I want to play too.
And then your kids started reading it too, didn't your kids came in?
Yeah, our kids. It's been really fun.
So yay, Daniel.
So, I think we need to kind of get this right. We're going to cover just the first two verses today. But actually, I got to switch this around now that I'm looking at the outline. There's this book of Daniel in the midst of the Old Testament, and it's a part of another group of books. As you kind of go from the 50,000-foot view, and you kind of look in, and so I'm guessing, Lori, you might want to take this one. But where are we in the narrative in God's story in the book of Daniel? Yeah.
So it's. Jeff and I kind of talked about this. I can't remember if it was offline or online. It's definitely in the books of prophecy. So Daniel would have been a contemporary with Jeremiah and Ezekiel. So as far as chronology goes, that's where we are. Daniel's a little bit of an interesting book, though, because in the Hebrew Bible, it's with the wisdom books and the writing.
Yeah, interesting.
And in our Bible, it's with the prophets, which it is, but it's also this combo, right? Of it's stories about a prophet and prophecy.
Yeah, it's a narrative,
as opposed to
he never prophesies,
right?
And the thing you're looking for in that is, a thus saith the Lord type statement.
Yeah.
The book of Daniel is more apocalyptic. It's going to look more like the book of Revelation.
Right.
He's relaying things about what's to come, not declaring what God has said is to come. It's just a different approach.
Yeah, and it's cool because it happens, where there have been all the prophecies about, Deuteronomy 28 is about to get fulfilled, and if you do this, then I'll do that. All that stuff is happening, and then we also have them in exile. So it's a good snapshot of this is what is going to happen, this is what did happen, this is what's going to happen.
Yeah. So I want to break out a little. They called it the historical tuning fork in Bible college, but you had Saul, David, Solomon. So Saul, there was he had no heart for God. David had a whole heart for God, and then Solomon had a divided heart for God, and that divided heart for God led to the split
nation
between Israel and Judah. And so there was the northern kingdom of Israel, and there was a southern kingdom called Judah. And they both fell at different times. So at this point of the book, Israel had already fallen to Assyria. And so then, there's some time that goes by, and Judah's still hanging on, even though Babylon has sieged it a couple times. Jerusalem, Judah's headquarters was in Jerusalem, and so in the very first verse, which I know I'm getting into the text a little bit, but it sets up kind of where we are in the story of Scripture. We actually see, it's verse 2. We actually see Babylon is on its way back from conquering Egypt. And on the way back, they siege it again. And I think it's that the story picks up in the second siege, because the third eventual siege completely takes Jerusalem down, and Babylon takes over.
Yeah. Okay.
But Daniel in the first siege was taken, and so his whole life was lived on Babylon soil.
Right.
For
from the time he was a teenager, basically.
To I guess 70. He lived to I think his 70s, and so I think right now, what do you think? Around 20? You think teens to 20?
Late teens, 20.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's kind of where he is. So that's kind of where we are, coming off of Saul, David, Solomon. A couple hundred years, you've got this divided kingdom going on.
And the background of that is in 2 Kings, 24, 23, 24. So if you want to go back and kind of put a little broader context on it. I like to do that. Like when I'm teaching somebody how to kind of navigate the Bible, I'll do that. Because it's easy to see in the New Testament. If you look at Acts, all the letters, you can kind of point back to, when those people start showing up in Acts. Like, when did Paul meet the Thessalonians? When did Paul meet that kind of thing? Well, you can kind of do that with the historical books. You look at 1st, 2nd Kings, 1st, 2nd Chronicles, and then you kind of look at the prophets and go, oh, that's when that guy lived, or that's when that guy was writing about, or that's when that invasion happened. So it's a good way to make those books mean something to you, aside from just facts and figures.
I've said this before on the podcast, but I'm always reminded at this moment, I've had a chance to study this. In the last couple months, really. But, but it's really funny. People come to me, and they'll be in 2nd Chronicles.
Right.
I mean, or one of the prophetical books. And they're like, remember in this verse when this very specific thing happened? And they think, because I'm a pastor, that I have everything memorized.
Like, no, actually.
Let the listener understand. It's okay if you're like, what in the world? How did they know that? Well, it's because we just read and we studied. And so it's okay. Like, don't feel like you're behind, or don't feel like you're, struggling. Just keep reading and keep being curious.
We don't take the table of contents out of our Bible at a certain point. Like we still need the basic helps. When we're
totally
studying.
One of the things. Oh, sorry.
No, go.
One of the things I noticed as I was doing some research, and it was extra biblical research, which was really fun. So this is
were you Googling your theology?
Well, it wasn't theology, because it was history.
It was history.
And I think I have to trust the Google on history, but at least timeline. So Aesop's fables, or Aesop was writing his fables right about now.
Really?
Yeah.
Did not know that.
Confucius and Buddha.
Wow, you lived here too long. That's hilarious.
Oh, it is, because I used to call Buddha.
That's awesome.
That was a great slip. That was fun. Okay, and then Greek art was excelling. And so this is all happening. And what I found interesting about those things is we still read, Aesop's fable. We still know about Confucius and Buddha. But this story of this tiny little nation that could never get its act together, and divided, and then was conquered by other world powers, and yet Daniel in the lion's den.
Yeah.
Or Daniel in the fiery furnace. And like the story, and then all 66 books. Like this little tiny nation that was always getting bullied and beat up. Like the story is preeminent over Aesop's fables.
Because the story is about God.
That's exactly right. Yeah. and that's what's so, it's like an apologetic to me.
Right.
In my own faith.
Yep.
That like, if I ever start doubting, I'm like, there's this Bible and there's these books and it's really just preeminent. It's, these stories and the whole 66, the whole of the 66 is just preeminent and it still lives and it's still powerful and will move us. And clearly that's why we're doing this book, is because the things that happened in this was motivating and encouraged us. And so,
and it all agrees with itself.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the crazy part is, we say this in the Institute, but you can't get two people in a room to agree on things.
That's right.
And yet, over 40 authors over this huge span of time, the books all agree with each other. They point to each other. They overlap each other factually. And it is an apologetic. It's amazing.
I'm glad you brought that up because I was looking at some themes of Daniel as I was reading through it. And you said all scriptures agree with each other. You extract theology from the book.
Right.
These are themes we've learned in different books.
Yeah.
We did Joseph a couple years ago. And there's similar themes.
Right.
Of God's sovereignty, of the way of the world versus the way of God's kingdom. There's these themes that are here that we've seen before and it all agrees. Super encouraging.
One of my favorite things that I found in my research was we kind of referred to verses 1 and 2.
Yeah.
But just from a historical perspective, that 100 years before verses 1 and 2 are written about, was written about in Isaiah 39. And it's the story about, at that time, the king of Babylon, who, and it probably is around that first siege time, but the king of Babylon at that time comes and visits Hezekiah, and Hezekiah welcomes him and he takes him all around the storehouses, and he has this moment of pride where he shows the king of Babylon all of the goods from the temple, even though he had been commanded not to do that. And basically Isaiah's like, "What? Why did you do that?" And he says, and he's like, "Well, there's nothing in my storehouses that I didn't show him." And Isaiah says to Hezekiah, "Hear the word of the Lord of hosts. Behold, the days are coming when all that is in your house and all that which your fathers have stored up into this day shall be carried off to Babylon. Nothing shall be left." And you know what Hezekiah says? He says in verse 8, "The word of the Lord that you have spoken is good." For he thought, there will be peace and security in my days.
Wow.
Right?
That's good. And then can I now read verses 1 and 2?
Go.
Because it goes right into that. So in the 3rd year of the reign of Jehoiakim, which was Josiah's son. So Josiah, good king. Jehoiakim, one of the worst kings in the history of Judah. So king of Judah, Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, came to Jerusalem and besieged it. In verse 2, and the Lord gave Jehoiakim, king of Judah, into Nebuchadnezzar's hand with some of the vessels of the house of God, and he brought them to the land of Shinar, to the house of his God, and placed the vessels in the treasury of his God. It was mocking. He was mocking God. And I love that. I just want to highlight that God was the one at this moment still in control. He said it in Isaiah 39. I think there was some foretelling, as you said, I think in 2 Kings 24. And then here we are, and God orchestrates this. But Nebuchadnezzar thinks he's mocking God, but God's the one that is pulling the strings here.
Well, and there's so much to notice there. So if you go back to 2 Kings 24, it says that for 3 years, Jehoiakim was just serving. Like things were actually okay.
Right.
Like they had been taken over, but it was kind of a peaceful coexistence a little bit. Hey, it
was a friendly captivity.
You're going to kind of play by our rules. You know what I mean? Because they hadn't overthrown them yet. That's why the eventual fall was so radically different. Like they truly cut their legs out from under them. This was more of a, if you play nice, everything will be fine. But if you don't, then, And so Jehoiakim, a little note I had, he withheld tribute and threw off the yoke of Babylon, basically meaning their rule. Like he decided to push against the thing God was using. That's ultimately what he was doing. And again, it kind of looks like from Nebuchadnezzar's point of view, it's like, how dare you come at me? Right. God's point of view is like, how dare you come at me?
Right.
Because I put this in place to woo you back to me and to make my point that I've been trying to make for a few hundred years now, but you're not listening. So let's try this. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Let's try this. And so Jehoiakim's like, no, we're not doing this anymore. And God's like, okay.
Yeah.
But one of the things you notice in Daniel, because so much of our current moment, I know just enough outside of Twitter to know this, right, is that anytime the modern church feels like, and it's probably historically accurate across all times, but if we feel like we're losing something, then obviously somebody's against us. Well, what if it's God?
Yeah.
The fact that God allowed his holy vessels, not people, but like artifacts in the temple to be taken away to make a point shows that God is willing to use whatever means necessary to get our attention.
Yeah.
And we don't like that.
Yeah.
We don't like that because somehow we're supposed to come out on top of all this. And we will eventually, but not by the ways we think we can manipulate along the way. So Jehoiakim thinking he can manipulate, hey, I've got enough gas in me to, overthrow this. And God's like, no.
Yeah. No. It's the danger of saying, I don't have to worry about this because God is in control. Yeah, he is.
He is.
Yeah, isn't it interesting? I was just thinking back, connect this personally, just thinking about in my own life the last couple of months. And I shared this with you guys. Like when things were happening that felt like outside of my own control, I like intellectually knew, like, and theologically knew, but it was still hard practically. That's why, I admire, Daniel. There's a couple times where Daniel, we'll get to this later, like another episode, but like in 2:14, then Daniel replied with prudence and discretion. And then, I'm skipping around a couple words, but verse 15, he declared, why is the decree of the king so urgent? Verse 16, and Daniel went and requested the king to appoint a time. Like there was this, prudence, discretion, this steadfastness, this reasonableness, and things were outside of his control, but he knew God wasn't shocked. And it's just a reminder that sitting and settling and trusting, the good and the bad, the Lord's in control, the big, the small, the Lord's in control, the personal, the global, the Lord's in control, no matter the president, the policies, the unrest, that God is in all and over all. And we need to just constantly come back to that. Well,
and I would argue that Daniel 1:8 is where that happens. And I know we're going to come back to all of this.
Yeah, sure.
But Daniel 1:8 says, and it starts with the word but Daniel made up in his mind.
Resolve.
That he would not defile himself.
Yeah. Yep.
Like that's how he got to that list. God is in control. God is in control. He made up in his mind that he was not going to do that.
Yeah, and so then you ask the question, so why was this in the wisdom literature? Well, that's why.
That's right.
If it's prophecy, okay, one of the things about prophecy, okay, what is the point of prophecy? How is this prophecy functioning?
Right.
You look at Isaiah, it's going to be pronouncing woes.
Right.
Or that kind of thing. But for Daniel, the point of even the prophetic pieces in chapters 7 to 12 is continue to make that point of God is in control. So I'm going to show you presently that God is, actually, I'm going to show you back a few years ago and why you got here into the, under this guy's rule because God was in control. Now, as we're here, why don't we fear what we're going to experience in this captivity? Because God's in control. And in the future, why do we have confidence that this is all going to come out okay one way or another? Because God's in control. Like that's the point of the prophecy, and that's the wisdom it's trying to give us. So
Yeah,
really good.
That's really good.
I think lots of things we're going to pull out. We're going to continue to pull out. We talked about God's sovereignty, God being in control. There's going to be a direct comparison between the man who is Daniel and the man who is Nebuchadnezzar. There's going to be this pinnacle moment that something crazy happens to Nebuchadnezzar, and but it just shows that God doesn't share glory with another, and that when a man lives for his own glory and neglects the Lord, it doesn't go to a great place.
Correct.
And you can
that's a good way to say that.
And you can lose your mind, and that's a foreshadowing of what's going to happen. But I think that happens in my own life. That when I forget the Lord,
Lose your mind a little
I
bit.
lose my you start
Yeah.
a little crazy.
Yeah.
You know.
Hair gets all long, fingernails get all crazy.
That's what the beard's all about. Totally.
Yeah. So anyway, I hope what this does is it kind of gets you excited about the Book of Daniel. Obviously, we are excited about the Book of Daniel, and
I am now. Was that down? I was like, man, I really hope I can kind of get back to where I was a few months ago. I think we did.
I think
I did. Yeah.
Yeah, and so we might not cover every chapter, but I think what we're going to do is we're going to kind of go through and highlight and pick out some of these things. And so there's this historical narrative aspect, and then there is this this prophetical side of the book as well that we'll kind of dab into.
Yeah.
Dabble
is what I meant to say. Into. Hey,
we'll dab as we dabble.
Listen, it's our first time back. A little rusty. We're too rusty today. What did I say earlier? What was that?
I wasn't listening.
Oh no, Buddha. Buddha.
You said Buddha instead of Buddha.
Yeah. So anyway, we'll come back. We will be dropping these. We're gonna try every Thursday, but they might be every other Thursday. We will see how it all goes. But thanks for joining us on the Ridge Roundtable. And as always, if you have questions, please email us equip@austinridge.org. Thanks.